So, guys, I've got some sad news to talk about today. I know most of us have been distracted by the Grand Theft Auto 6 reveal, which honestly has been one of the few good things to come out of 2023. But I also have some horrible news that a lot of you all probably missed while we were all distracted. And that is the fact that the entire studio behind the development of Insurgency Sandstorm has now been sacked by the owner of that studio called Embracer Group. If you don't know what Embracer Group is, it's kind of similar to Tencent in the fact that they just buy up everything, squeeze as much money as they can out of it, and then destroy that said thing. Or at least that is my personal opinion. But the reason I wanted to make a video about this situation is because I actually think this is considerably worse than a lot of people maybe think that it is. I actually made a video talking about how Embracer Group was likely going to completely shut down Insurgency Sandstorm and fire the team behind it in the coming months, and unfortunately, it looks like I have been proven right. But here's the thing. The fact that I have been proven right is probably not a good thing, because this is indicative of something that I think is considerably worse, and I think it's going to continue getting much, much worse. So, for those of you who do not know, New World Interactive is a studio that has been around for a while. They made the original Insurgency mod, which they then turned into a game using Source, and then of course they turned that into Insurgency Sandstorm using Unreal Engine. I actually knew a lot of the developers who worked on Insurgency. I would actually say a couple of them are my closest friends, and watching what has happened to the studio and subsequently watching what has been done to those people who worked on the game has really made me fear, not just for Insurgency, but the entire industry as a whole, especially the tactical first-person shooter industry, which is significantly more niche than the entire gaming industry across the board. Now, I could go into an incredibly long tangent talking about all of the problems and issues that led up to this situation with Insurgency Sandstorm and its developers being fired and closed down, but I actually think it would be way easier to start this discussion by just saying this. A few years ago, New World Interactive, or, well, maybe more specifically, the people who owned New World Interactive, started announcing that they had plans to add paid cosmetics to their realistic tactical shooter. There was a pretty big backlash against this because, naturally, people don't really like paid cosmetics, especially ones that break immersion, added to their realistic tactical game. But the executives at the studio made an announcement addressing these concerns, saying that while they understood that these paid cosmetics would be seen as controversial, they were adding these paid cosmetics to a game that, was already full price in order to extend the lifespan of the game and support continued development. And after everything that has happened, after we have seen this whole situation through, I only have one question for you. How did that work out? And you see, that is going to be the main topic that I want to talk about in this video, because I'm sure a lot of you all have seen this huge wave recently of big corporations or these massive investment firms buying up studios, buying up entire games, and then injecting them full of overpriced microtransactions and DLC, trying to milk as much money as they can out of their players, but always under this narrative that all of the money from sales of these cosmetics and microtransactions and DLC is somehow going to go towards the continued development of the game and compensate the developers for making the game better. And I am here to tell you in this video, based on my own experience making games, working with a lot of these studios and the developers within them, that that is absolutely not what is happening. I have had a pretty interesting career over the 10 years now that I have been in the games industry, more specifically in the tactical gaming community. But I have had the pleasure of meeting and talking with and even working with a huge number of people who have gone on to make games like Insurgency Sandstorm and Squad. In fact, a number of them even work for me right now making our own game, which, I'm sure we're going to talk about later. But one of the most disturbing and, unfortunately, frequent things I have heard from all of them over and over again is stories about how either they themselves or their friends in the games industry as well have been routinely exploited and taken advantage of by large corporations or investment firms in the game industry who only care about making as much money as possible. And while we do live in America and all of these corporations are free to try and milk everybody for as much money as they can possibly get out of them, because we live in a free market, that means there also gets to be people like me who are free to call them out on their crap. And I want to tell you right now, this entire narrative that a lot of these giant multi-billion-dollar investment firms have been trying to create about how they need to put all of these overpriced paid skins into their games in order to support the development team, I'm here to tell you that that's a load of crap. But the reason it's a load of crap isn't because I don't think that the game developers deserve money. They absolutely do. The reason it's a load of crap is because based on my experience working with a lot of these studios, I would say that almost none of that money that you are paying on all of those microtransactions are actually going to the people working on the game. And here's why. You see, there's a big difference between an independent game development studio and an investment firm. An independent game development studio, when they get a lot of money, their first thought is to figure out how to use that money to make the game better. But that's not how an investment firm works. When an investment firm buys a game studio and they get a lot of money, their primary objective is to figure out how to use as little of that money making the game better as physically possible. And you might say, Blue Drake, that doesn't make any sense. How could they possibly not want to use the money from all of these microtransactions that they're specifically saying are for supporting development? Why wouldn't they want to use that on actually supporting development? And I'm going to tell you the reason why. And it actually has a magic word. And that magic word is profit margins. And, well, yes, look, I know that there is an element here that people can't help but just to laugh at. Like, oh, Blue Drake, profit margins, oh, capitalist pigs. It sounds like a meme. But this has been a situation that has been building up for years. And the only good thing about the situation that we're in now is I don't have to sit here and make these crazy far-off projections or predictions. I can show you all of these things happening right now. The studio that told you that all of these microtransactions and all of these DLCs were going to somehow go towards the development of the game and supporting the development team to continue its lifespan, you can now see with your own eyes that that was a complete lie. I shouldn't have to convince you anymore. I shouldn't have to show you evidence. It's right there in front of you now. But now that I have had this very interesting career going from a simple tactical gaming enthusiast to being a server owner who ran a tactical gaming community to becoming a YouTuber that covered tactical games to then evolving to being a game developer and running a studio making a very similar game to some of these games, I feel like I've gotten to the point where not only have I worked with a lot of these people in the industry and I understand what their experiences have been and what their opinions are on some of these matters, but I myself have a much better understanding now of what kind of resources are required in order to make these games. And one of the biggest issues, one of the most disturbing problems that I have been noticing throughout all of this, with these corporations doing their corporation thing where they're trying to make as much money as possible, is some of this marketing, some of these justifications and narratives that they're creating about why they need all of this money is quite frankly a blatant lie. And I would say even worse, I think in most, if not all cases, when these corporations are making these announcements about, how they need to put in all of these microtransactions and raise all of this money to do all of these things that they have no intentions of doing, I would actually go further and say that they know that they are lying while they're saying it. And that is actually what worries me more than almost anything. And let me start with this. So I've talked with a lot of people who have worked at NWI, and let me tell you, when I explain to you this situation, this is not unique to NWI. What I have been seeing behind the scenes with NWI is that the vast majority of funds that they're raising from the sales of their now massive catalog of microtransactions, the vast majority of that money is not actually going towards development. The vast majority of those funds are allegedly either going to A, executives who have no development experience at all and contribute nothing to the development of the actual game, or they're going to company profits, which are then sent as returns to investors who also have no development experience and contribute nothing to the development of the game. If you want, you can actually confirm quite a bit of this by going on to LinkedIn and looking at the people who are either the CEOs or the investors for a lot of these games. You can look at their background. You can see if they have any game development experience at all. And the vast majority of them absolutely do not. They come either from other investment firms or they come from other executive positions, often executive positions that have nothing to do with video games whatsoever. But they come into this space because they know that they can make money. And that's really their only job, is to figure out how to make money however they can, wherever they go, even if it means destroying the thing that they become the CEO of in the process, which I would say is exactly what has happened here. I have actually met a lot of these individuals. I have met the CEOs of these companies. I have met executives from Embracer. And the irony of a lot of these situations where they're asking for more money to fund development, even though these people are the highest paid people in the company, is that a lot of these executives, even though I myself am probably not the best developer in the world, I've gotten a lot of flack for that. I am a YouTuber turned developer. I am probably the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to development expertise, although I try as hard as I can, and I'm constantly trying to learn more every day. But some of these executives, at I would say the vast majority of these firms, when it comes to game development, make me look like Bill Gates. They have absolutely no experience making games. They probably have never booted up the game engine that their game is made on. I bet they don't even know, in some cases, what a game engine even is. And I wish I was exaggerating, but disturbingly enough, after my many, many years of interacting with a lot of these people at some of the highest positions in the game industry, I would say that I'm actually not exaggerating at all. Some of these people, if not the vast majority of them, at the highest positions making these kinds of decisions to shut down studios, deciding where this money goes, do not have any game development experience. They do not make games. All they know how to do is how to work with spreadsheets and look at income and look at expenses and cut as many of those expenses as they can, even though they really don't understand where that money's going, who they've hired, or what those people do. And that is slowly how we are getting into the situation that we're in now. And one of the main reasons I want to hit so hard on this is because when you see any of these studios that have been recently acquired by an investment firm. And you start seeing these announcements about how, oh, you should get excited about giving them more money so you can support continued development, and how that money is going to go towards making the game better and compensating the developers working on the game. You need to understand that that is absolutely a lie. Now, in regards specifically to NWI, this is something that you don't even necessarily have to take my word for. While I have had a lot of private interactions with developers from NWI who have detailed a lot of this to me, you can even see their developers talking about this in the public community spaces, like the Insurgency Sandstorm or the NWI Discord, as well as Reddit and elsewhere, detailing the exact same things that I'm telling you right now. As soon as Embracer came on board and took over the studio, the first thing they started doing was firing some of the most talented developers on the team. Immediately after firing those developers, they outsourced the same jobs to anyone outside of the country that would do it as cheaply as possible. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I have nothing against outsourcing work to other developers outside the country. I know lots of developers from the Philippines to Eastern Europe, even in Bangladesh, the developers of Zero Hour, who I work very closely with, and I have a lot of respect for their capabilities. Outsourced labor is not the problem here. And we all know the reasons why corporations like Embracer are outsourcing all of their work to other countries. It's cheaper. And, again, if they had $1 million and they had a choice between hiring 100 Americans with that $1 million versus hiring 1,000 Eastern Europeans or people from Bangladesh or, studios from the Philippines, if they used that $1 million to hire 1,000 people from the Philippines to do 10 times as much work than they could hiring people in America, but they were using all of that money, then I would actually kind of respect that. That would make sense. At least they're using their money wisely. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is these corporations are making these announcements about, you need to spend more money so we can support development and hire more developers. And that's why we have to put in all of these microtransactions. And they're making exponentially more money than they used to. I'm talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. And yes, they're also simultaneously firing all of their American, Canadian, European workforce and replacing them with people who are significantly cheaper. But here's the issue. When Embracer makes a post like this, and they're like, oh, we have to put in microtransactions in order to raise money to continue development of the game and support our development team. When Embracer uses that whole narrative to raise, let's say $100 million, and then they lay off their entire team and replace them with more cheap outsourced labor, do you think that Embracer is still going to use that whole $100 million that they said was going to go towards development? Do you think they're actually going to use all of that money on hiring more outsourced developers to make the game even better? No. What they're going to do is they're going to fire their original team, and then they're going to hire the exact same number of people, but for less, and then all of the money that they saved from firing people, well, they're just going to put that in their pocket. And that's going to go to either their executives, who, again, know nothing about game development and are just career CEOs who are able to finagle their way into being a CEO of the company, or it's going to go to investors from the investment firm as returns, who, again, have absolutely nothing to do with making the game better and are just people who look at spreadsheets all day, buying and selling companies and squeezing as much money out of people as they can before they destroy the company and move on to the next one. And you don't have to take my word for this, because now, not only can you see this happening in real time in front of your eyes, this studio that was sitting here telling you that all of this money was allegedly going to be going to making the game better and increasing the lifespan. Well, they just lied, because they just destroyed the studio in front of you. They shut the whole thing down. So obviously the money wasn't going towards that. And if you go onto the Discord servers where all of these developers who worked on the game are talking about the situation, you're going to see all of these developers saying things that corroborate everything that I'm talking about in this video.
And after everything that I've said, after this whole conversation where I have not only shown you this situation where clearly you have been lied to and your money has been taken and must have gone to somebody else because it definitely has not gone to the developers of this project or the project would still be going on. What I want you to take away from this video isn't just the realization that you have most definitely been manipulated by this corporation in this instance, but I also want you to notice that this same exact thing is happening again right now to other games in the industry. A lot of other games that I know people who watch this channel right here love and play all the time. One of the most prominent examples of a game that has recently been acquired by a very similar investment firm to Embracer is Squat, who, again, not sure if you all have noticed, is starting to go on a disturbingly similar trajectory since getting bought by this corporation, where after getting bought out, they are slowly starting the process of incorporating DLCs, microtransactions, paid cosmetics, all under that exact same narrative and the exact same justification that that money is going to go towards supporting development and continuing the lifespan of the game. And I am here to tell you, do not buy into that. It is not true. That money is either not being used on development at all, or such a small minority of it is actually being used on development that it might as well not go towards development whatsoever. And furthermore, the more that you actually buy into them successfully convincing you to give them more money without them having to promise anything in return that they actually have to deliver on, the more you are going to encourage these corporations to continue rinsing and repeating that exact same strategy with all of the games that you love that they are going to then acquire and do the exact same thing to. So please, when you see these narratives emerge and you see these corporations trying to pull these strategies, please do not fall for it. Now, to wrap up this video, I want to say the following. If there is anyone who has any disagreement with me about anything that I have said in this video, if you are an executive who either owns NWI or operates it at a high level, or any other very similar studio that has been acquired by a similar company and is facing similar allegations, and you want to prove me wrong, the only thing that I will accept as proof that you are not doing this is for you to show me your tax returns and show me your expenses and your accounting books that I know you're not going to show me because you all are hiding this. But the only way that I will be convinced that this is not happening is if I am actually shown the money and where the money is going, and of the funds that are raised through all of these microtransactions to fund development. Unless I actually see hard ledgers that are showing where that money is actually going to, then based off of my experience, I am going to continue with my perspective that these corporations are lying to their players about where that money is going, and they are not actually spending that money on development. And if anything, they are using this whole narrative of spending that money on development as a, in my opinion, sociopathic business model in order to convince their players to spend more money on supporting something that these studios actually have no intention to follow through with. If you want to prove me wrong, if you are an executive and you want to prove me wrong, show me your salary, show me everybody else's salaries, and show me your income, your profit margins, and your expenses. And if you can actually show that to me and prove to me that you are not doing the things that I would say at this point is pretty obvious that you're doing, then I will absolutely shut up 100%. But until that happens, then I'm going to say that
based off of all of the evidence that I have seen so far, as well as my own personal experiences, what is happening is what I have said. All of these corporations that are putting in all of these microtransactions and are monetizing these games heavily under the narrative that the money is going towards development, those corporations are lying. The money is not actually going towards development. The vast majority of that money is being pocketed by executives who have absolutely no development experience at all, and the few remaining developers who actually are on payroll are getting fired and then replaced by outsourced workers who cost significantly less, but then the margins and the profit that is actually saved from firing people and replacing them with cheaper workers is, again, not going towards more development. It's just being pocketed by more executives who have no development experience and are not contributing to the game development process at all. That's what's happening. And I would say in this instance, with Embracer shutting down NWY, that is the biggest smoking gun that I have been right this entire time. That is absolute proof in the pudding. And I am going to continue searching for these examples and following through with watching these companies and seeing if they actually either go bankrupt or sell their companies and whether they actually deliver on their promises. And I would say right now, dude, it's like 10 for 10. I have been making a lot of videos recently where I have very unfortunately been proven right for a lot of my most dire accusations. And, this is one of those situations I don't even want to be right. It's just depressing at this point. It's kind of fun being right, I guess, but, when you're right about predicting the end of the world, well, I mean, maybe not the end of the world, but the end of this industry as we know it, that's not a good thing to be proven right on. And I really do hope that the only light at the end of the tunnel is that all of these corporations are eventually going to destroy so many of these studios that there's going to be no studios left for them to buy anymore and do all of these shady things with. That's kind of an awful light at the end of the tunnel, that maybe these corporations will just suck all the value out of this corner of the industry to the point where they have to leave. But I mean, if that's the only way that we can get rid of these entities that are doing this, then at this point, I'm all for anything that gets them out of our space. But I would say the only other way that we can put a stop to this before that happens is to just start being smarter consumers and to not fall for these frankly sociopathic, manipulative business strategies where they are guilting people into handing over money and not even following through on all of the promises that they make that they say that money is going to go towards. Which, I mean, is that not kind of a scam? I mean, I guess it's not, because they've also convinced people to buy this without promising really anything in return. But hopefully people just stop falling for that, right? Hopefully. All right, well, that is it from me for today. I am probably going to be speaking on this matter quite a bit more and using this as a recurring point when I start talking about the game that we've been developing, which is incredibly similar to Insurgency Sandstorm, that we actually started the development of in part due to the things that we were hearing from the developers who were working on Insurgency Sandstorm. We saw that these things that were happening would very likely, inevitably, destroy Insurgency Sandstorm and the studio making it, and that is why a few years ago we started making our own game, so that when Insurgency Sandstorm inevitably imploded, we would at least have something to continue on. And it's disturbing that we were right. I mean, I guess I was still kind of holding out for the possibility that we were wrong, but hey, maybe we would still at least have a cool tactical game. But yeah, this all came true. Insurgency Sandstorm imploded. I quite frankly think that Squad is next. I think Squad is going to be the next studio that is going to implode. And again, that is one of the reasons that we made our game, is to prepare for the inevitable implosion of all of these games that we originally built our communities around. But hopefully by the time Squad implodes, Operation Harsh Doorstop will be roughly at where Squad is now in terms of features and playability. This is all kind of surreal to be talking about in a way, because, I mean, again, we all somewhat were prepared for this happening, but watching it actually happen is surreal. But I'm ultimately really happy that our community made the decisions that we made early enough so that when this all started going down, that we have built ourselves. I mean, I don't know if this is too biblical a reference, but I mean, we basically built ourselves the video game equivalent of an ark to survive this oncoming implosion of all of the games that we adored so much and that we built our communities around. But at least now we have our own game to build our community around, which has been a significantly harder journey than just playing an existing game. But I guess after this, it's been proven to be worth it. All right, that's it. I am going to go and prepare for the launch of our game's next big update, and I hope that this situation is going to make you all even more excited for our game's next big update as well. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.